What is going on? Welcome to the Nickolas Natali Show. We are back with a solo episode. First solo episode, probably in 30 to 40 episodes. Who knows? We're going to have to dig through the archives and see how far the rabbit hole actually goes. Today, we are going to be doing a Q&A. I tossed it up on Instagram, wanted to check in, see what you guys wanted to hear about, and the questions didn't disappoint. They ranged from entrepreneurship to finance to health, so let's dive in. The first question I got here is my running journey, and then followed up with somebody else's who said fitness, lifestyle changes, diet, and preparation for a marathon. These are great cues, great topics to set us off, baby. All right, so I started getting into running probably longer ago than folks realize. I guess we can go even further back to I ran cross country in high school. I did 2 years. I did my freshman year and I did my sophomore year. And I always had this theory, let's really back this up here. I always had this theory that running is a mental game, which I still believe it is. Most of it is mental. And so I thought you could convince your mind to sprint the full duration of a course, you would win every time. So in high school, it's 3 miles, I think, or 3.1, something like that. And it was the last race of the season, and I hadn't ever tested out this theory. I hadn't tested it in any of the practices, nothing, but I knew this was going to be my shot to do it. So when we lined up on that starting line, and they said go, I took off, and boy, was I cooking. I was in first place. That was the first time I'd ever been in first place throughout the entire duration of the season, and it felt amazing. It was like, wow, I am smoking these fools with distance, and obviously, as to be expected, probably around the half-mile mark, I died. Everything started to go wrong. I obviously didn't hydrate because I was in high school. I probably was goofing around all day, probably didn't eat anything, and I just felt horrible. And it wasn't like I felt horrible and I still managed to suffer through it in place. Well, this is I didn't make it in terms of varsity, which is what I was running. All the varsity folks passed me, talking boys and girls. JV passed me, talking boys and girls. And the next thing I know, I started seeing middle schoolers catching up to me, which was a race after ours. So I actually think I came in second to last because I saw the last girl finishing for JV. And I sprinted it in because it was a home meet, my home school, sprinted in so people didn't think I didn't try. And as soon as I crossed that finish line, I yacked everywhere. But I don't think that's what we're referring to when we're talking about running journey. What we're talking about is how the marathon started coming to be. So in 2022-ish, when I still lived in San Diego, I was doing a dirty bulk. I was trying to get some beef on these bones, and I was putting on some size. As they say, mass attracts, and I was attracting some mass. I don't know what spurred the run itself, but I do know I was playing basketball quite a bit at the time, and I went from an outside shooter to a post player purely based on my size. So I wanted to get out there and start running and huffing and puffing. So I actually took a look at this not too long ago. I was using Map My Runs to track my runs, and I would only be able to go half a mile. I would only be able to run to the end of the block, and then I would just walk home. That is the initial stages of my adulthood running career, if you can call it a career. I think you have to get paid to call anything a career, right? Is that true? Somebody fact check me on that. But I couldn't run. I couldn't run at all. I was carrying a lot of weight, and my cardio wasn't anything. And even those half miles were 13-minute, maybe even plus pace. I still remember when I finally got a mile, I'd run half a mile, and then walk, and then finally run the other half. I was doing 15 minutes. It was some brutal numbers. Not to say, I'm not knocking any paces out there. If you're listening to this and you're like, that's my pace, hey, that's great. We're moving our bodies. That's what it's all about. I'm saying in comparison to where I am today, 2.5 years later, hot dog, that seems like a long ways away from it's been a long journey is basically what I'm saying. And I still remember the day in San Diego. I'd been running for a few months, and I finally was able to run. It was either 5 or 6 miles without stopping. I still think that was at a 12 or 13 minute pace. Just trying to get through the runs is where it initially started, which I think is kind of the base for anybody trying to start running, is just going out there and doing it and not holding any judgment toward yourself on whether you're running or walking, because over time, you're going to just end up running more. Like you're going to run and then walk and then walk and then run. And eventually those runs become into jogs, and you're always jogging, and then you're not stopping, and it's just progressive. I think that's one of the beautiful things about running is you can see the progress pretty quickly. So when I moved here to LA, I ended up making a friend who was a much better runner than me. And at this point I was running 4 to 5 miles pretty consistently throughout the week on different days, and being able to like get through them. My pace was lower. I did a cut, so I was down to like 186 when I moved here. So I dropped a bunch of weight. So I was nice to be able to run and not feel every part of my body moving. And so I kept running with this friend who was a much better runner than me. And I started to get a little faster and faster. That's a good rule of thumb for life. If you want to do something better, surround yourself with people who are already better at that thing than you. It just rises you up, brings you up. So that's what happened. Just being more consistent in the runs, running with people that were better than me, that got me faster. And then just continuing to push. I do think there's a cap to where you can probably maintain a certain level of running without having to get into the longer distance running. Like I think getting up to 6 to 8 miles and staying in that range, you could still be a very, how do I word this? There's a toll that long distance running takes on your body. And I think you can get into the 6 to 8 mile range, like having that be your cap at all times, and be in excellent running shape for sure. I feel like that's not a hot take though. Regardless, I kept pushing the distance each time because I still was not very fast. I don't think I'm very fast now, and you can see that in any of my runs and numbers. I'm not like a fast runner, but I am doing it, which I think is the name of the game. But I kept wanting to know how far I could take it, and I eventually ran a half marathon solo on a whim of like, no, that's not true. There was one before that. I ran a 10 miler with that friend. First time I'd ever ran 10 miles. Then I ran a 13.1 solo just to see if I could do it like 2 weeks later. Survived it. And then ultimately that started to just trickle into my head like maybe there is a marathon potential here, to just go for it and see what happens. And LA is a way more active culture, at least the part that I'm in, than when I was in San Diego. And I think that's helped a lot too, which is another great rule of thumb. Be in community with people that are active and you're likely to be more active, and being in a walkable area has helped. And so the marathon came about. This is long-winded, but the marathon came about because my brother signed me up. I think he bought it for me as a Christmas gift. He drew my name for Secret Santa, and that's what he bought me, was signing up for the marathon. So as long as like, all right, I had to do it. Then I saw one of my friends post on Instagram of him running a long distance run, like further than I had ever ran. Still up to that point, it was like a 15 or 16 miler, and I was like, what are you training for? Like, why are you out running? He's like, the LA Marathon, baby. And I was like, I feel like I'm down. And so that also kind of spurred some momentum to just know somebody else was also doing the marathon. My brother did it with me as well, but someone more local to where I'd be training. And the training process for the LA Marathon was probably one of the best things that I've ever done for myself as a human, as an adult, as a man in general, because I think those long distance runs uncovers something about you. At least it did for me. I actually ended up finding out there was a lot of things still not yet processed. And there's a meme online that's like former athletes. It's like 2 paths, therapy or long distance running. And when I first saw that, I was like, wow, that's pretty accurate. Because all of these instances that I had stored up that I didn't realize were stored away, like I finally had time to process them. And all the things, truthfully, that bothered me or made me angry, it was like, it was flushing out of my system, because I was, when you work out, when you're upset about something, it's like you work out a little harder and then you feel better because it's like you shed yourself of that perhaps negative experience. So I trained for 6 months for the LA Marathon, and I felt like the 2 to 5 months when the distances started getting a little longer were so instrumental. And that's why I would recommend running a marathon to anybody simply for the training and blocking out time to do something really difficult on a weekly basis that builds your confidence, and giving yourself alone time without distractions to think and process and work through things. I've heard a lot of entrepreneurs talk about how they come up with their best ideas on runs or in the shower. And I think that is true to a degree. But in general, the whole clearing your head, like runs clear your head, I think at a certain distance it does. And depending on how you're running, like I got to the point where I got rid of music when I ran simply because I didn't want the distraction. I wanted to hit a more, not to sound woo-woo, but borderline like meditative flow type state where I could cipher through all the things that I hadn't been able to either throughout my week or left uncovered throughout my life. Super, super beneficial. And of course, the physical benefits are great too. Is it time intensive? It is. But is it worth it for the personal growth? Absolutely. So the LA Marathon comes about, and I have a pretty audacious goal for it. I didn't tell anybody what that goal was. I didn't tell anybody what time I was striving for, because I knew if I laid those expectations out with others and I didn't meet it, not to say I didn't believe in myself, I just knew it would make it a lot more difficult and make the marathon seem like a loss if I didn't, which I know that's not true. If you do a marathon, it's an amazing thing. It's a beautiful accomplishment. It's very difficult. It's way harder than I thought it was going to be. I trained for 6 months and it still absolutely whooped me in a few ways. And I'll briefly describe that experience because I know there's still like 2 more questions in this Q&A. What are we doing? We're just yapping here. Anywho, LA Marathon, way harder than I thought it was. I was gunning for, I'll tell you now since it's already passed, I was gunning for a 3:30, which is about like an 8-ish minute pace, I think, around there. Don't quote me on that. Or maybe it was a 7:45-ish pace. And you simply don't know what you don't know doing your first marathon. How you trained with your fueling during your training makes a difference. The course itself that you run on makes a difference. The environment makes a difference. And then obviously, having never done one, I've never ran a marathon at a marathon pace before. So I cruised through the first 20 miles, like blew through them. And I was expecting to see certain people at certain miles, and I didn't. And that demoralized me, which then got me into my head of like, oh, you're letting this small thing get to you. And then I was. And then my watch died. So I had no idea how fast I was running. And I watched a video not too long before I did the LA Marathon. Did a lot of prep for it too, like mentally and watching things and researching things beforehand just to not be as blindsided, which I still was, that talked about if you have a goal time and your mind still thinks it's possible throughout a marathon to hit it, you're not going to stop. Like your body's still going to go because your mind's going to be like, we can still hit that goal. Like keep pushing. But as soon as my watch died, I had no idea what time I was at. I was like, forget this. This is stupid. This is so dumb. And everything that I've known or everything that I researched and the people I talked to, and I talked to a running coach twice before doing it too, they talked about a marathon being in two races, essentially, the first 20 and the last 6. And that was definitely true because around 20 and 21, the miles became very, very difficult, just very painful. And all I wanted to do was stop or just survive. And also, just for full runner's clarity's sake, I was so hungry, not like determined hungry, but like starving. Like I depleted all of the fuel, that I had put into my body by that time. So it was just like a lack of experience for sure. I ran it in a 3:56, but the first 20 I was on pace for like a 3:30-ish. I was going to hit it, but hey, what are you going to do? So when I finished the marathon, like crossing that finish line, this is a kind of a bummer. And I wrote about this on Instagram too. I was so disappointed in myself because I had set out this goal. I had trained for months for this event. I wanted to hit that time, hit that number. And I felt like the last 6 miles just destroyed everything that I had been working for. So I had never been more disappointed in myself, which was a very unreal feeling to experience crossing the finish line of a marathon. Just being like, like I felt like I let myself down. It was I was like really sulking in it. So 2 days later, I signed up for the San Diego Marathon because I was like, I have to do it again. I have to do this better and meet that goal. So the LA Marathon was like March 17th, and the San Diego was June 3rd. So April, May. Had like April and May to train for the San Diego, and I trained way harder. And I actually learned a lot during that training session. I started doing intervals, I started doing hills, I started doing intervals within the long runs. So running at marathon pace, running at easy pace, running at marathon pace. I was cruising and crushing it. And then I did this one extremely, how should I word this? I did a really hard workout and I did it back to back because I enjoyed it so much the first time. So I ran 15 miles, and 5 of the miles were straight uphill and then 5 of the miles were straight downhill. It was an elevation of about like 1600, and it was on concrete and it was windy roads. And so I did it the first week, and I was like, this was so much fun. It was so difficult, and I felt like the training was really good because I was like, if I can run that in a decent pace, like San Diego is going to be a breeze. So I did the same workout the next week, and I lined it up to where I was going to go see a comedy show after with some friends, but the workout ended up taking longer, or I started later, one of the two, and I had to push harder than I wanted to at the end going downhill, and I ended up overexerting my leg, which ended up causing like IT band pain. And I don't think I realized how, I don't want to say how bad, but how severe it was, because I was like, man, this really hurts. But I was like, I'm gonna be late, so I pushed through home another 5 miles, finished the hill, another 5 miles back. So I got home, I didn't do anything, didn't get to like refuel my body, went straight to this comedy show, and my leg was hurting the whole time. The next day, I was like, it's probably not that bad. I'll just do a bike workout instead. Hopped on the bike, pushed it real hard on the bike. That ended up, I think, making it worse. And then every time I tried to run after that, I was like, this is torturous. I think it was about 3 or 2.5 weeks actually out from the San Diego Marathon. So I didn't run at all before that. And I didn't even know if I was going to do it simply because of how painful my leg was. And I ended up doing it. This is the running journey. I ended up doing it, and I just told myself I was just going to run it light. Just going to run this marathon lightly, which is true. I did. I ran it much wiser than I did the first time. Like, my pace was pretty consistent throughout, and my legs hurt for sure. And I finished that marathon at 3:59, which is 3 minutes later than my first one, which is so funny, which I think that was like experience showing itself just from like maintaining pace. But my leg hurt, and then my right IT band hurt, but they didn't hurt crazy bad when I finished. But I ran that one with my brother as well, and I waited, hey, no judgment here. I waited probably like 45 minutes to an hour for my brother to finish, and I wanted to run it in with him, and I was so cold and rigid. So when I ran his last quarter mile in with him, we like sprinted it in, I felt my leg hurt really bad after that. Like that was the worst pain. It's excruciating pain after that. And so I've given it 3 weeks, and I just went on a run a few days ago. I think last Sunday, 4 days ago. Yeah, it's been 3 weeks, and it still hurts so bad. So I don't know. I don't really know what that means for my running journey. I just know that I can't run, at least not right now or for the foreseeable future. I would like to do one more marathon. I don't want to jinx us here, but I'd like to do one more marathon at the end of this year, which means I'll have to start training in October, give me 3 months, and then knock out one more marathon in December. So that is as abbreviated of the running journey as I can get. It is not something that I think people have been coming up to me and telling me, I don't know where they're coming up to me on the street. I think people have been talking to me and saying, oh, it's so cool you're getting into running. You really like it. I don't know if I like it. Like, I don't know if this is a passion of mine, but I certainly love the challenge that it brings, and I love the mental clarity that it brings. Like, all of the benefits of running, I really enjoy. I think running is just a means to have those benefits for me, if that makes sense to you. In any case, I highly recommend it, and I am more than happy to help anybody on their journey toward running. I don't know diddly squat. This is all very new to me. I couldn't run at all, and now I'm running. That's pretty much all I know. I know there's form involved. I know there's nutrition, which I'm learning more about the fueling process, which I feel like I'm getting much better at every time I do a marathon. But by no means do I feel like I am anybody who's anybody in this space. Look at my numbers. I ran a 3:59 and a 3:56. But I'll be back, hopefully healthy soon to give it a true try. But it's also so much fun. Those race environments, this is the last thing I'll say so I can wrap this up. The race environments are so much fun and so worth it. If you're in LA, highly, highly, highly recommend doing the LA Marathon. The San Diego Marathon was fun. It was fine, but it was kind of barren in parts. It was like almost borderline lonely out there for a few miles. But the LA is packed with people the whole time. You see so much of the city, and it's a blast. The one part about the LA Marathon is you do have to run past the finish line and go like 4 miles or 4 or 5 miles past it and then run back to it. That part, not cool. But the environment, amazing. All right, that's it for this one. Thank you for the question. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and I will see you next Friday at 6 a.m. Bye.